All right, let's dive into some global strategy today. We've got this Harvard Business Review article, Managing Differences. It's the central challenge of global strategy is the subtitle. This is going to be good.
Yeah, it's funny. This article, it really kind of flips the script on how we usually think about global strategy.
Yeah.
It's not just about balancing economies of scale and making everyone happy in local markets.
Right.
The really challenge is all the differences you hit when you cross borders, right?
Okay, so how do we break that down?
Well, the article, it gives us this framework. They call it the AAA triangle.
Okay.
And there are 3 approaches.
Okay.
Adaptation, aggregation, and arbitrage.
So most companies, they trip up because they think there's one way to go global.
Exactly, yeah. They try to pick just one when, it's really about picking the right approach or even misting and matching depending on your strengths.
Okay, so let's go through each of these. What is adaptation?
Okay, so adaptation is all about, tailoring your stuff, products, services to really click with each market, each specific market.
Okay.
Think localized ad campaigns, right? Or even creating a whole different product line just for one region.
So it's like being super relevant.
Yeah. Hyper relevant, even if it means a lot more work behind the scenes.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. What about aggregation?
Aggregation, that's all about efficiency.
Okay.
It's about standardizing everything, your offerings, your processes, so you can unlock those economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even globally, right? Think about, one product for a worldwide launch.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe centralizing R&D, things like that.
Got it. So it's about maxing out efficiency, even if you got to sacrifice some local flavor.
Right.
Okay. And then there's arbitrage.
Arbitrage. Yeah, this is about strategically using the differences between markets to your advantage, sourcing materials from countries where it's cheaper, right? Wow. Taking advantage of those wage gaps or, even playing the regulatory field a little bit.
Oh, interesting. So it's like playing global chess, right? You're moving your pieces around the board to your advantage. The article gives some really cool company examples here. Did you know IBM has actually used all 3 of these A's over time?
Yeah, it's a great example of how a company's strategy isn't set in stone.
Yeah.
IBM, they started out super focused on adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Basically mini IBMs in each country catering to every local need.
So they were all about that local touch in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. But then, things changed, the world changes,
Right.
and they started shifting towards aggregation.
Okay.
Creating these regional structures, streamlining operations, trying to get those benefits of scale.
Mm-hmm.
And now, more recently, they've even embraced arbitrage, expanding their workforce in India, taking advantage of lower labor costs.
So they've gone through the whole evolution.
And exactly.
Yeah.
And it shows how companies can, kind of move between the A's as new stuff pops up, new opportunities, new challenges.
So IBM's journey is a good example of things change and your global strategy needs to be able to change. The article also talks about Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, P&G.
A company that's known for its, tons of different consumer brands.
Right.
They started with a huge emphasis on adaptation too, right?
For sure. And it worked well for them for a while. But then they kind of hit a wall in terms of global growth.
Oh.
That's when they started blending adaptation with aggregation. And it's really cool how they managed this balance.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
The article mentioned these things called global business units and market development organizations. What are those all about?
Okay, so global business units, we call them GBUs. These are specialized divisions within P&G.
Okay.
They focus on developing products for the global market.
Oh.
Think their laundry detergent division.
Okay.
They handle things like R&D, product strategy, that sort of thing. Now, market development organizations, MDOs, they're responsible for regional sales and marketing.
Okay.
They take those global products and adapt them to local tastes.
So, okay, I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
GBUs make the products for everyone, and MDOs handle the regional rollout, adapting as needed.
Precisely.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
But I bet that creates some tension, right, between global consistency and local relevance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's definitely tension there.
Yeah.
And so P&G uses these things called decision grids.
Okay.
They're basically like flowcharts to decide who's responsible for what. It helps minimize, friction between the GBUs and the MDOs.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a complex structure, but it lets them play both the adaptation and aggregation game really well.
Interesting. Now, what about arbitrage? Do they use that at all?
They do, mostly for things like outsourcing, sending some operations to lower cost locations.
Right.
But they're very careful to keep anything that directly touches the customer in-house.
Yeah.
It's all about protecting that customer relationship while still, taking advantage of global efficiencies.
So they're being choosy about arbitrage, making sure it doesn't mess with, like, their connection with the customer.
Exactly.
Smart. The article then switches to these two Indian IT giants,
Oh, yeah.
Tata Consultancy Services,
TCS.
TCS, and Cognizant.
Mm-hmm.
Both started in India, and they used arbitrage early on because of the lower labor costs there.
Right.
But then they kind of took different paths, didn't they?
It did, yeah. It's interesting how even companies from the same place, same industry, can choose such different approaches.
Yeah.
TCS, they've gone for both aggregation and arbitrage.
Okay.
They have this global network delivery model.
What's that?
It's basically how they use different types of software development centers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Some centers are super specialized, for complex projects, that's aggregation.
Okay.
Others are more about like cost-effective delivery, so that's arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
This network lets them handle all sorts of client needs while still having a global reach.
So it's a way to be, like, globally competitive,
Yeah.
indie life, locally relevant.
Exactly, yeah, depending on the project.
Smart. And you mentioned that Cognizant is all about arbitrage and adaptation.
Right. They've put a ton of effort into building a strong presence in the U.S.,
Okay.
adapting to like the specific demands of that market while still using the cost advantage of their Indian roots.
Mm-hmm.
They even have this unique two-in-a-box structure for projects.
What's that?
So every project has two leaders,
Oh, wow.
one in the U.S., one in India,
Okay.
and they share responsibility and even compensation.
2 leaders for every project, 1 in each key market. That's a pretty bold way to manage adaptation and arbitrage at the same time. And speaking of that, the article talks about these AA strategies.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
So AA strategies are when a company tries to be really good at 2 of the AAA strategies at the same time.
Okay.
It's not easy. It's like walking a tightrope,
Mm.
But companies like, P&G, TCS, Cognizant, they're showing it can be done,
Right.
but it takes some serious organizational creativity.
So they're kind of like pushing the boundaries of how we think about global businesses.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the article does say that, like, mastering all 3 A's, what they call the elusive trifecta,
Yeah.
that's super difficult. Like, maybe even impossible. Why is that?
Well, think about it. There are only so many hours in the day, right?
Right.
There are limits to how much managers can handle. Juggling all 3 A's can really stretch even the best leaders. Plus, you've got potential culture clashes within the company. Different parts of the company might prioritize different A's, right?
Yeah.
And then, you've got competition
Mm-hmm.
that forces companies to focus. It makes it hard to be great at everything.
Right. Yeah.
And then there are all these external relationships that can influence your strategy too.
So it's like spreading yourself too thin can actually make you vulnerable.
Mm.
But the article mentions GE Healthcare.
Right.
They're seemingly pulling off this trifecta.
They are, yeah.
How are they doing it?
It's a really interesting case study. They seem to do it through a few things.
Okay.
One, they separate different functions so teams can focus on their own expertise.
Mm-hmm.
2, they might be benefiting from weaknesses in their competitors. It gives them more space to experiment.
Okay.
And 3, it's possible they're kind of downplaying adaptation a bit,
Oh, interesting.
focusing more on global standardization and arbitrage. But even they aren't immune to the tension of trying to do it all.
So even for a giant like GE Healthcare, managing the trifecta it's a balancing act.
It is, yeah.
The article then uses this AAA triangle to look at a real-world example. They try to develop a strategy for Philips Medical Systems.
Oh,
The
right.
smallest of the big 3 in diagnostic imaging,
Yeah,
facing tough competition from GE Healthcare and Siemens Healthineers.
right.
Historically, Philips Medical Systems has been all about adaptation, customizing their products for local needs.
They have.
But this focus has come at a cost.
It has.
Their R&D spending is behind their competitors.
Yeah.
and they've been slow to move production to cheaper countries, so they're struggling to compete on price. So they're good at adaptation, but their aggregation and arbitrage game needs work. What are their options? What can they do?
Well, the article looks at two Ellis strategy paths for them.
Okay.
One is to double down on adaptation aggregation,
Okay.
trying to improve their economies of scale without, sacrificing their local responsiveness.
Okay.
The other is adaptation arbitrage.
Where they completely redesign products to be cheaper in emerging markets and use low-cost production locations.
Yeah,
Both of those sound really challenging.
they do.
Doubling down on adaptation aggregation might not be enough to catch up.
Right.
And adaptation arbitrage, that goes against their strengths and puts them head-to-head with GE Healthcare, who's already doing something similar.
Exactly. You're picking up on the nuances here, which is great.
Yeah.
Both options have big hurdles. That's why the article suggests a third, more unconventional path.
Okay.
A lateral shift.
A lateral shift. What is that?
Instead of fighting in the existing market, Philips Medical Systems could use their adaptation skills in a new related market where they have an advantage.
Okay.
And they've actually started doing this. They're moving into home use medical devices.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So they're finding a new game to play where they can use their strengths.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's classic out-of-the-box thinking. And this move fits perfectly with their experience in consumer electronics and home appliances.
Right.
Gives them a head start in this new market. But even with a lateral shift, they still need to choose which A will be their main focus.
Right. They can't avoid that fundamental choice.
Exactly.
This AAA triangle is like really powerful for thinking through these strategy problems. It makes you think about being clear, focused, and encourages you to be creative about using your strengths and adapting to a world that never stops changing.
Exactly. It highlights the need for clarity and focus, but also that you need to think outside the box. The world's changing fast, and you have to be ready to adapt.
Welcome back. We've been talking about the AAA triangle for global strategy, how companies like IBM and P&G use adaptation, aggregation, and arbitrage. But I'm curious, how does all this apply to individuals?
That's a really good point. We often think of global strategy in terms of huge companies.
Right.
But these principles, they're super relevant for anyone dealing with today's super interconnected world. Like whether you're a freelancer, working with clients all over the place, or an entrepreneur building a startup, thinking globally, or even just, a professional looking for opportunities abroad.
All right, right.
Understanding these A's can really give you an advantage.
Okay, so let's make this real for people.
Yeah.
Imagine our listener is like a freelance graphic designer. They've got clients all over the world. How would they use adaptation?
Oh, adaptation would be essential for them. They'd need to be so aware of cultural differences.
Oh, yeah.
In design, right? Like aesthetics, color palettes, even what symbols mean.
Right.
Something that's like a hit in one culture could be totally off-putting in another.
So it's not just about having like a great portfolio.
No, not at all. It's like being a cultural chameleon.
Oh, wow.
And it goes beyond just the visuals, too.
Really?
Think about communication styles. How do you build trust with a client from a culture where direct feedback is, considered rude?
Oh, that's a good point.
Or how do you manage projects across, tons of time zones? Adaptation it's about the whole relationship, not just the design itself.
So it's like building trust, understanding. It's more than just the end product.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fascinating. Now, let's say our listener is building a tech startup.
Okay.
And they dream of being like a global, company.
World domination, right?
Yeah. Where does aggregation fit into that?
For a startup like that, aggregation is key. They need to be able to scale across markets.
Okay.
Think standardizing their product, automating their marketing, building a team that can work together from anywhere.
So it's about building like a well-oiled machine, right?
Yeah, that can run smoothly no matter where it is.
But wouldn't that clash with, the need for adaptation that we just talked about?
It definitely can. That's where it gets tricky. Startups, really any company, need to find the right balance.
Right.
Standardization versus localization. It's a tightrope walk.
Mm-hmm.
They got to ask themselves, what are the core parts of our product or service that have to be the same everywhere?
Right.
And what can we tweak to fit local tastes?
And you got to be strategic about where you adapt and where you standardize, depending on your product, your market.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
One last scenario. Our listener is like a financial analyst.
Okay.
They're looking for like global investment opportunities.
Interesting.
How does arbitrage come into play there?
Oh, for them, arbitrage is like a superpower.
Oh, wow.
They're constantly studying different markets,
Mm-hmm.
looking for like price differences, differences in regulations, maybe even currency exchange rates.
Mm-hmm.
Then they make investments that use those differences to make money.
So they're like global opportunity hunters.
No, exactly. Always looking for inefficiencies they can exploit.
It's like playing the stock market, but on a global scale.
Yeah, you could say that. And just like the stock market, there are risks.
Right.
You need to really understand global markets, be able to spot trends, and be comfortable with uncertainty. But if you can master it, arbitrage can be very rewarding.
So we've seen how each of the A's can be used by individuals in different fields.
Right.
But the article also talks about organizational fit,
Yeah.
right? When you're putting these ideas into practice.
Absolutely. Whether you're on your own or part of a team, you got to think about how any changes you make will affect your structure, your systems, even your culture.
Yeah.
It's not just about money. It's about making sure your organization, even if it's just you and your laptop, can handle what comes with using a certain A or maybe even a combo of them.
So even if you're a one-person show, you're still working within a system, right?
Exactly, yeah. Your routines, the tech you use, the people you collaborate with,
Mm-hmm.
and any big shift in your global strategy has to work with that system. Like, let's say our freelance graphic designer decides to use arbitrage.
Okay.
They start working with clients in places where it's much cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have ways to communicate across languages, make sure they get paid on time, and keep their work quality high.
Right.
They might need to invest in, translation software, project management tools, maybe even hire virtual assistants to help them out.
Because it's more work, more complex.
Exactly.
And it's not just the logistics, right?
Yeah.
It's the culture, too.
Oh, absolutely. Like we said before, our designer needs to adjust their communication style.
Mm.
That's even more important when you're working with clients in totally different time zones who maybe have different expectations about feedback and revisions.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's more than just sending emails at the right time. It's about building real relationships,
Right.
understanding their perspective,
Mm-hmm.
being sensitive to their needs. It's about showing cultural intelligence in every interaction.
So this idea of organizational fit, it's really about like managing differences, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's not just adapting to markets, it's adapting how you work to fit this global world.
Exactly.
And that brings up another interesting point. Sometimes the best strategy is knowing when not to integrate.
That might sound counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to force too much integration can actually hurt you. It can make you inflexible, stifle creativity, and just make things way too complicated.
So you're saying sometimes it's better to keep some separation between different parts of your work?
Yeah, even if you're a one-person team, think about it. Even within ourselves, we think and work in different ways, right?
Right.
Sometimes we need to be super focused and analytical. Other times we need to be more creative and free-flowing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Forcing those two modes to work at the same time, it can be overwhelming, right?
Yeah, I get that.
And it's the same for organization.
So it's about finding the right balance between integration and separation, depending on what you're doing.
Precisely. And it's a constant process. It takes knowing your strengths and weaknesses, being able to delegate, and being open to experimenting.
It all goes back to focus, right? Like we
Mhm.
talked about before, companies need to pick one or two A's to focus on.
Yeah,
Individuals need to do that too, don't they?
absolutely. Trying to be everything to everyone, you'll just burn out and be mediocre.
Right.
You got to figure out what you're really good at, what you're passionate about, and where you can truly shine. Then pour your energy into those things.
So it's about being strategic, knowing when to say yes, when to say no, setting boundaries to help yourself succeed.
You got it. It's about knowing your limits and making choices that support you in the long run.
This has been really insightful seeing how the AAA triangle works for individuals, not just for big companies. It's for anyone in this global world.
Exactly. And remember, it's a tool, not a set of rules.
Right.
It's here to help you think, make good decisions, and navigate this crazy global world with confidence and creativity.
Speaking of the global landscape, the article talks about this shift from globalization of markets to globalization of production.
Right.
It's a really interesting point.
It is. For years, globalization was all about selling to more people, expanding into new markets.
Right.
But now we're seeing more focus on like offshoring and using global supply chains to cut costs and be more efficient.
Which creates new opportunities
That's
and new
right.
challenges, right?
Absolutely. And the article points out that a lot of companies are still trying to figure out how to manage all this. They might be offshoring or outsourcing, but not really thinking about it strategically.
And that's where the AAA triangle can help, right?
Exactly. It gives you a way to think about global production, make smart decisions about where to put different parts of your business.
Like it's not just about saving money, it's about the bigger picture.
Right. For example, if you move production to a cheaper country, you also need to think about quality control, protecting your ideas and your brand's reputation.
And what about the long term, right? Like, is that location stable
Mm,
politically, economically?
exactly. What about skilled workers? Will global events mess up your supply chain?
So many things to think about.
These are all critical questions, part of any good global strategy.
So it sounds like managing a global supply chain is a real balancing act, right?
It is weighing costs against risks and sustainability.
It's not just about avoiding risks either, right? It's about finding opportunities in different places.
Absolutely. Some companies put their R&D centers in emerging markets to find new talent and better understand local needs. Others partner with local businesses to reach new customers or learn about cultural differences.
So it's not just about finding the cheapest factory. It's about strategically placing different parts of your operation to take advantage of what each place offers.
Exactly. Globalization is a two-way street. It's about finding that balance between global efficiency and local responsiveness, using your strengths and exploring new possibilities.
It feels like this shift to globalization of production adds even more complexity to global strategy.
It does. You need a new way of thinking, a more nuanced approach. You have to consider everything: economics, politics, social factors, technology.
And that's where the AAA triangle comes in, right?
Exactly. It helps you see the big picture, understand how different parts of the world are connected, and make smart choices that align with your goals.
This has been a really great discussion, but I want to bring it back to you, the listener. Remember that question we asked at the end of part 1?
Yeah, about which AAA strategy you connect with most.
Right. Which one resonates with you, and how could you use it to achieve your goals?
Have you thought about it more? Are you leaning towards adaptation, aggregation, arbitrage, or maybe even one of those daring AA strategies?
We want to hear your thoughts. We'll dive into that in part 3 and explore your unique perspectives and experiences. But for now, let those questions simmer in your mind. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been unpacking this AAA triangle, looking at adaptation, aggregation, and arbitrage. But now, it's your turn. What do you think about all this?
We've thrown a lot of ideas out there. It's always interesting to hear how listeners connect these concepts to their own, lives, their work.
Yeah. At the end of part 2, we asked you to think about which of the AAA strategies, clicks with you and how you could use it to reach your goals. So have you had time to think about it? What's been on your mind?
Have there been any aha moments where you saw a connection to your own career, maybe a side hustle, or even just how you tackled challenges in your everyday life?
Maybe you realized, hey, I'm already pretty good at adaptation. You can navigate different cultures, you adjust your communication style, or maybe you're more drawn to aggregation. You like efficiency, streamlining things, getting the most output.
Or, maybe you're a natural at arbitrage. You see opportunities where others just see roadblocks. You can leverage those differences to create something new.
We'd love to hear your stories, your insights, even the struggles you've had when it comes to, dealing with differences in this global world.
What are some of the things you've bumped into when working with people from different backgrounds, adapting to new cultures, or even just trying to keep up in this fast-changing world?
Yeah, and how have you gotten past those challenges? What strategies have worked for you? What have you learned along the way?
Remember, there's no magic formula, right? What works for one person might not work for another. That's what's cool about the AAA triangle. It gives you a way to think strategically about what you're good at, what opportunities you have.
Yeah, it encourages you to think differently, experiment, find what fits you, what helps you reach your goals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, one final thought. Think about this word, globalization.
Globalization.
Yeah, it's like globalization and localization smashed together. And it captures this idea of thinking globally but acting locally.
It's like finding that sweet spot, right? Between, keeping things consistent and customizing things. Between global efficiency and understanding those local differences,
Yeah,
being globally minded and locally rooted.
that's it. as you move forward, in your career, your personal life, whatever you're doing, remember that. Embrace how connected our world is, but celebrate what makes each culture, each perspective unique.
Keep exploring, keep learning, keep adapting. Because in this crazy global world, the only thing that stays the same, is change. And hey, who knows, maybe you'll even discover a whole new approach that we haven't even thought of yet.
Keep those minds open, keep those questions coming, and most importantly, keep diving deep.